Ever get that feeling? You know, like love is practically its own language.
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving into a collection that takes that idea pretty literally, I think. Tainele Iubirii, which means...
Secrets of Love.
Yes, Secrets of Love, Poems in Romanian by Radu Lucian Alexandru.
Ooh, Romanian poetry. Sounds intriguing.
Right. Now, before you go thinking Romanian poetry, that's a little niche for me, I promise, stick with us. Because what we're really after are those universal truths about love.
Those core human experiences.
Exactly. The kind that can jump any language barrier.
Yeah.
And to help us decode all of this, well, we have our resident expert back again.
Always happy to geek out about poetry, especially when it comes to love. And Radu Lucian Alexandru, he's a fascinating contemporary poet. He's really active online.
All right.
Yeah, and he's publishing like right now, this year in 2024, which is always so interesting to me because you get to see...
What's resonating with people right now.
Exactly, a snapshot of love in 2024.
I like that. Okay, so tell me more about this collection. I kept seeing this phrase, polyamory collection. Tell me everything.
It definitely caught my eye too. But actually, looking at these specific poems, it's not about polyamorous relationships, at least not in a super straightforward way. It's more this feeling of multiple muses, maybe. Like love is a force that's bigger than just one other person.
I like that. I like where you're going with that, especially with how the poems talk about you. It's never totally clear, right? Is it a lover, a reader, some divine presence? It's almost like we as readers get to choose.
Exactly. There's this wonderful ambiguity. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. Alexandru, he kind of invites us to explore these complexities without saying, this is exactly how it is.
Right, right. Okay, now I'm really curious to dive in. Even just looking at the table of contents, we've got titles like Invitation, we've got Alchemy, Ars Magna, even like Dragon is in there.
Dragon, wow.
Right, talk about setting a mood. But then we also have Doom, the order of importance, freedom. It's a whole roller coaster.
It's like he's saying, okay, get ready, we're going to look at every single part of love. Because you have that mystical side. Love is this big, almost magical force with those first few titles you mentioned.
Right, yeah.
But then he's also like, but hold on, there's the other side of this too. With things like doom, right? Maybe a more, shall we say, experience perspective.
Yeah.
One that acknowledges the heartbreaks too.
That honesty is refreshing, though, isn't it? Because we know it's not always sunshine and roses. So to see that reflected in poetry is kind of amazing.
Absolutely. It's that groundedness that I really appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. So before we go too deep down the rabbit hole of themes, I kind of want to do something a little different. I want our listeners to hear Alexandru's work in its original language.
Oh, I love that idea.
Even if, you don't understand Romanian, the music of the language, I think, speaks for itself. What do you think? Can we hear a little snippet?
Absolutely. I'd love to. There's this one called simply Iubire Love in English.
Perfect.
It's on page 6. Expert speaker reads excerpts in Romanian.
Wow, okay. I mean, I didn't understand any of that literally, but I felt it.
Right.
It's incredible how much emotion just the sound of language can carry.
It's amazing, yeah. The power of poetry.
It really is. And it's like we got this little sneak peek into the soul of these poems before we even fully understand them, which I think just makes me even more eager to unpack what he's actually saying. Like, what are the big themes here? What are those secrets of love that he's exploring? It's like we dove right into the heart of it, even without a dictionary, you know?
It's true, yeah.
But we do have those translations. So let's uncover some of these secrets. What's Alexandru sharing through these poems?
Well, one of the biggest things he tackles, which, might seem kind of obvious when you have a collection called Secrets of Love.
Right, got to be like, right.
Exactly. But it's more than just, oh, love, love, love. He's really grappling with the essence of love itself. Like, what is it? Really?
Okay, so not just love poems, but poems that ask, what is love?
Exactly. Is it this divine force, a fleeting feeling, that source of like the highest highs and the lowest lows?
Because it can be all of those things. Right?
Exactly, and he doesn't shy away from those contradictions.
It's so different from so much love poetry, which always feels like it's trying to give you the answer.
Yeah.
Alexandru's like, let's explore this crazy thing together, and it's going to get messy.
Yes, 100%. And that's where his use of language, his imagery is just like next level.
Tell me more.
He draws on nature, mythology, even music to make you really feel the weight of these questions, the emotions.
Give me an example. What's a line, an image, something that really brings this to life?
There's this poem, Fortuna, which means the storm in English. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this incredibly vivid picture of how when this person, this you, arrives, they bring with them a literal storm. Oh, wow.
Like mirroring what's happening in the speaker's heart.
Hold on. Love as a literal storm. That's intense.
Right. It's like those metaphors we use all the time, you know, he swept me off my feet, or she's a hurricane. But Alexandru takes those feelings, which can feel kind of cliche, and he makes them real, you know? You're right there in the middle of the storm with him.
You can practically feel the wind, I bet. What else? This is fascinating.
So there's this other thread that runs through the collection, and I find it really powerful. It's this idea of the presence of absence.
Okay, now that sounds like the opposite of what it is. What does that even mean when we're talking about love?
It's this idea that a lot of these poems hint at a love that's like desired, remembered, maybe even imagined more than it's actually fully there. Think of like a fading memory, a dream you can't quite grasp. That bittersweet longing for something you might never fully have or might have lost.
Exactly.
And it makes me think about how Alexandru uses you in these poems, how it's always a little undefined, right? It's almost like as readers, we're being invited into this dreamlike space where those lines between reality and longing are blurred.
Oh, I love that. That's such a beautiful way to put it. And it really gets another important theme, the ambiguity of that you, because he's blurring those lines between the lover, the reader, even a kind of muse, a source of poetic inspiration.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it creates this space where the personal and the universal kind of collapse into each other.
I love that. And you know what? It makes me think about that excerpt you read earlier, because even though I had no clue what the actual words were, I still felt this connection to it. And I think those blurred lines between you and me, between all of us who have felt these things, are part of what let me access that, even without understanding the language. It's like he's saying, hey, these poems, these secrets, they're yours too.
Exactly. It's that incredible thing that poetry can do, speaking to both our individual experience and reminding us of how much we all share.
Okay, but we've talked a lot about how these poems make us feel, which is important. But what about how they make us think? What are some of those more like philosophical ideas about love that Alexandru is putting out there? It's true, we've done a lot of feeling it out with these poems so far.
Yes.
But Alexandru, he's not just trying to make us feel things, right? There's got to be something more he wants us to take away from these poems, right? Some wisdom about love.
Oh, for sure. He definitely leaves us with a lot to think about.
Good, because I was hoping for some answers.
Well, he might not give us clear-cut answers. It's more like he's giving us these invitations to see love in a new light and maybe question some of the things we thought we knew about it.
Ooh, challenging assumptions. I like it. So what's one of those ideas, those invitations that really got you thinking?
So there's this line that just keeps coming back to me. It's from his poem Absenye, which means absence. And the line is Ubin pakastuim takonne iubim, which, if you translate it, is basically saying, by loving, we sin if we don't love each other.
By loving, we sin. Wow. Okay, he really went there with that one. What do you think he means by that?
It's definitely a powerful statement.
For sure.
It makes you wonder, is he saying that love can't exist without some element of selfishness? Or maybe that real love needs to be reciprocated to actually be real.
Maybe he's saying those fairy tale ideas about love being this purely selfless thing are kind of a fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, we always have some kind of need in love, even if it's just wanting to feel loved back.
It makes you think, right?
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, facing that need, that potential for sin, like he calls it, is part of what makes love real, authentic.
Okay, I think I see what you mean about Alexandru raising more questions than he answers, but in the best way possible.
Right.
Like, he's making me rethink everything I thought I knew about love.
That's what's so great about poetry, about these poems in particular. It's like we're getting this window into a totally different way of seeing love, experiencing it, writing about it.
A way that's okay with things being messy and complicated, right?
Exactly.
I think that's a good lesson to keep in mind. Sometimes those big truths, they don't fit into a perfect answer.
No, they don't.
And it's those questions, the mysteries, that keep us coming back for more. Which, speaking of, sadly means we're out of time for today.
Aww.
But a huge, huge thank you for being our guide to the secrets of love, taking us all the way to Romania and back.
It's been my pleasure, truly. There's always something new to discover with poetry, and I think Alexandru's work really shows us that.
It does. And for our listeners, if diving into the complexities of love with us today has you wanting more, let us know. What other hidden gems should we unearth? What other unconventional sources should we be exploring? We want to hear from you. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep asking those big questions, and embracing the mysteries. Okay, so are you ready to, like, dive deep into something totally different this time? We're talking Romanian love poetry. You know that feeling when you're, like, accidentally overhearing someone's, like, super personal conversation?
Yeah, it's like that kind of vulnerability, right? That rawness that just sucks you in.
Totally. So the book we're exploring is called Tainele Iubirii, which translates to Secrets of Love. It's a brand new collection, actually, by this Romanian poet, Radu Lucian Alexandru. And let me tell you, this guy, he really lays it all out there.
It is kind of like reading someone's diary, but in verse, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that, like, you chose this for our deep dive is fascinating. It makes me think you're ready to explore some seriously deep emotions.
Definitely. I mean, Secrets of Love, even just the title, it's intriguing.
Right. And from the poems I've read so far, it seems like Alexandru is really grappling with this love that's both, like, incredibly exciting, but also agonizing.
Yeah, and he uses all these powerful metaphors, often from nature,
Yeah.
to capture those extremes. Like in the poem Fortuna, which means the storm, he doesn't just say, oh, love is like a storm. He creates this whole scene. You've got the wind and the waves crashing.
You can almost feel it.
Exactly. And then there's absenia, which means absence. And here the feeling is completely different. It's like this emptiness, this vast open space, totally bare.
It's amazing how he can, like, shift the mood so quickly. But there's this one thing that pops up again and again, this whole idea of the muse.
Ah, yes, the muse. It's such a classic figure in art and literature, the source of creative inspiration. But there's that catch, right? She's often unattainable, which I think leads to both joy and frustration for the artist.
Totally. It's like he's saying, this woman, this muse, she's the reason I create. But she's also, like, the root of all my heartache. And we see this a lot in the Musa, where he writes, a muse is Eve, with her temptation entirely given to the gaze of a poet. What do you make of that connection? To Eve, I mean.
Interesting. Yeah, he's playing with some pretty loaded imagery there. I mean, linking the muse to Eve, to temptation, maybe even sin. It suggests that this inspiration, this love, well, it might come with a price.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got passion, longing, a mysterious muse. But then Alexandru takes things even further. He starts mixing these super romantic themes with, like, philosophy and even religious ideas.
It's a bold move. And I think that's what makes his poetry so interesting. He's not shying away from the big questions.
Right. For example, there's actually a poem titled Dragoste, este, Dumnezeu, Love is God. That's a pretty intense statement to make.
It is. He's putting love on this whole other level, a divine level. It really makes you stop and think, what does it even mean to experience love that way?
Right. It's like he's starting his own religion almost, with love at the very center. And yet it's not all, like, sunshine and rainbows, is it? He also goes to those darker places. Doubt, unrequited love, even this feeling of impending doom.
Exactly. That's where the poem Doom comes in. It's almost like we're witnessing this internal struggle play out.
Yeah.
The poet is having this dialogue with, get this, a daemon.
Like an inner demon kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going back and forth about the consequences of love, the regrets that can stay with you, the fear of being vulnerable.
That's deep stuff.
Yeah.
But it's something I think a lot of people can relate to, you know?
Yeah.
That fear of, like, putting your heart out there and having it broken.
Absolutely. And that's what's so brilliant about Alexandru's work here. Even though these poems are incredibly personal, he's tapping into something universal. Those feelings of longing, doubt, that search for connection, they go beyond language, beyond culture.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why we still read love poems from hundreds of years ago, right?
Right. They speak to something timeless. And it's not just what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's how he's saying it, right? I mean, even in the English translations, you can feel how musical his language is.
Oh, absolutely. Even in translation, you get that sense of rhythm, that musicality. It just adds another layer to the emotions.
Yeah, it's like he's composing music, but with words.
Exactly. He even talks about that directly in one of the poems, actually, in căutare, in songs. He talks about love having this, like, innate musicality, this rhythm that connects two souls.
So it's not just the words themselves, but, like, how they flow together.
Right. Like a melody that gets stuck in your head.
Totally. And speaking of getting stuck in your head, there's this other thing he does, this word he uses a few times, décantec.
Ah, yes.
I had to look it up, I'll be honest.
It's a really cool word, actually. It comes from Romanian folklore, and it's often used to describe a magic spell or an incantation.
Interesting.
So by using that word décantec, he's weaving this magical quality into his love poems. Like he's saying love itself has this power, this almost supernatural element. It can change your whole reality.
Which, honestly, it kind of can, right? I mean, think about how love can completely shift your perspective. Like suddenly you're seeing the world in a whole new light.
It's powerful.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this other poem, Aproape, close to her, where he talks about this feeling of almost reaching something real, but it's just out of reach.
That longing for what could have been. It's something I think everyone can relate to on some level.
For sure. It makes you think about all the barriers we built, all those walls we put up that prevent us from experiencing real connection.
He talks about that a lot, actually. This idea that we're often our own worst enemies when it comes to love.
It's like we're drawn to that vulnerability,
Yeah.
but we're also terrified of it. Speaking of vulnerability, there's this one poem that really got to me. Scry write to me.
It's heartbreaking. It's like love itself is speaking from beyond the grave, begging him to never stop writing, to keep their memory alive through his words.
It's incredibly powerful. And then just when you think you have his style figured out, he throws in this curveball, a poem called Wow.
I know, that one throws you for a loop,
Yeah.
especially when you realize it's actually based on this text about writing poetry.
So meta, he's like analyzing his own process,
Yeah.
inviting us into his brain to see how these poems came to be.
Exactly. It makes you question everything. How much of this is intentional? How much is raw emotion?
Exactly. And then there's 15.54. It seems so random.
But it's actually a timestamp, a frozen moment that holds so much meaning for the poet.
He even mentions drinking cider and thinking about his muse, who he also refers to as 1554.
It's like he's permanently etched that time into his memory and connected it to her.
That's so interesting. It's like how a certain smell or song can instantly transport you back to a specific moment.
Totally. He captures that so well, how even the smallest details can become so powerful when they're tied to our memories and emotions.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us this map of his heart,
Yeah.
with all these intensely personal landmarks. And he's like, come on, let's explore this together.
And what's so cool is how he brings the outside world into these really personal emotions. It's not just about what he's feeling on the inside, but how those feelings change the way he sees everything around him.
Yeah, you can really see that in Piunde, where he's like wandering around, lost, both physically and emotionally.
And that repetition of the word where, it just hits you right in the gut.
It does.
He's not just looking for a place, He's looking for a way back to this connection he's lost.
Yes. And that actually makes me think about Tur, right? Which at first seems like it's just about this city in Romania, Turda. But then it becomes this whole journey through his memories, triggered by things like a bird singing or a ray of sunshine.
It's like he's using these everyday things, these sensory experiences, to unlock these really deep wells of emotion and memory.
Yeah, like when you smell a certain perfume.
Yeah.
And it takes you right back to a specific time or place. Our brains are wild like that.
They are, and Alexandru really gets that. He's a master of capturing those moments. And he's also really interested in these opposing forces. Light and darkness, presence and absence, what we can touch versus what we can only feel.
Right. Like in the poem Nume, where it's almost like he's struggling to define love with words. Can we ever really do that?
It's a good question. He seems to be saying that maybe words aren't enough, that true understanding exists beyond language.
Maybe. And then there's dum-dum. Nu izudao. Dum-dum is not your God. I mean, wow, right?
It's definitely a statement, and that repetition of dum-dum, which seems to represent some kind of God, it creates this really interesting rhythm, like a chant.
It's like he's questioning everything, faith, religion, maybe suggesting that true faith is something much more personal, something you experience, not just believe in.
Which I think leads really well into subliminal, the sublime. It's like he's found this new kind of faith, one that's rooted in nature, in art, in human connection.
He's been on quite a journey throughout this collection, hasn't he? From heartbreak and longing to this sense of peace and transcendence.
He has.
Yeah.
And then he brings us home with Doi, too, which is this really beautiful reflection on what it means to share your life with someone.
It's a good reminder that no matter what, even when we feel lost and alone, love has this incredible power to endure. So as we come to the end of our deep dive into Radu Lucian Alexandru's Tainele Iubirii, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that human emotion is universal. These poems, whether they're written in Romanian or any other language, they tap into these timeless feelings, things we all experience.
Beautifully said. Now, for everyone listening, one last thought before we go. If you had to pick one color that captures the essence of your own love story, what would it be and why?
All right, so you've sent us this collection of Romanian love poems, Tainele Iubirii, Secrets of Love, that's what it means, right?
That's right.
and just published this year by Radu Lucian Alexandru. And, well, I've got to say, I'm always up for a little mystery, especially when it comes to matters of the heart.
And mystery is something this collection has in spades. So what was your first impression? What grabbed you about Alexandru's work?
The language, for sure. I mean, he's writing in modern Romanian, which isn't surprising. But it really got me thinking, like, how does a language that's so deeply rooted in tradition find a way to express, well, modern love?
It's a fascinating question, for sure.
And then there's the whole online presence thing. He's got a blog, YouTube channel, even like TikToks.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. This is a poet who definitely knows how to, meet his audience where they are.
He really does seem comfortable in both worlds, doesn't he? The ancient and the digital.
Yeah.
And, I think that really comes through in his poetry, too. Take, for example, that line you flagged about the imagery, because, wow, it's something else. He writes, Mi-ai intrat in sufle, ibiam gesitmele muza.
Oh, yeah.
Which translates to, you entered my soul, love. I found your name, muse.
I know, right? There's something so direct, so passionate about the way he writes. No beating around the bush, just straight to the heart of it all. And that use of muse, so evocative.
Absolutely. And the way he positions love in that sentence, grammatically speaking, it's almost as if he's addressing, like, a person.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's an interesting choice, right? Because even though he's using modern language, he's also tapping into this ancient tradition, this idea of giving life to abstract concepts,
It's like a blend of old and new at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this really cool mix of modern and traditional. But what about the whole secrets of love thing? What are these secrets he's trying to reveal?
Well, one of the things that really struck me about this collection is how he connects love and spirituality. For example, he has a poem titled Dragoste, este, Dumnezeu.
I remember that one.
Which means love is God.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a statement. It's almost like a little blasphemous, wouldn't you say?
It is a little bit.
But also incredibly romantic at the same time.
Right. And it's the kind of statement that would really resonate with a Romanian audience. I mean, I'm not saying it's like a common phrase or anything.
Yeah.
But that connection between, earthly love and the divine, it runs deep in Romanian culture.
So it's like a theme that's been around for ages.
Centuries, really. And what Alexandru does is he takes that theme and he reimagines it for the 21st century. It makes you stop and think, what does it even mean to experience love in a world that's become so secular?
So he's not just writing love poems, he's grappling with something much, much bigger.
Exactly. And he even says at one point, In tote e o poveste de Dragoste. In everything, there's a love story. It's a pretty powerful lens to view the world through when you think about it.
It really is. But then he goes and throws in something like, a can of cider.
Right.
With like doom metal playing in the background. I mean, talk about a juxtaposition.
It definitely caught me off guard the first time I read it.
Me too. It's like he's taking these traditional, almost sacred ideas about love and faith and then filtering them through something, I don't know, raw and kind of dark even. You're
right. It's definitely there. And that's where the whole doom motif comes into play. Because he uses that word a lot, and I don't think it's by accident. What do you make of it?
It's funny. It's giving me, like, Beauty and the Beast vibes almost.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, you've got these classic images of love and, longing and desire.
Yeah.
And then, bam, doom metal soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying love can be this beautiful thing, but also destructive at the same time.
And that duality is so essential to Alexandru's work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like he's always exploring those two sides.
Yeah.
The light and the shadow.
Yeah.
Of love, of faith, even of, like, existence itself, I think.
Yeah, no, totally.
And, that doom motif, it could be his way of acknowledging that darkness that kind of lurks beneath the surface of even the most beautiful experiences.
Which makes the whole rose thing even more interesting, because he talks about roses a lot, right?
He does.
Like, they're everywhere in this collection.
And it's not by accident. Because roses, or trandafir as they're called in Romanian, they're hugely symbolic in their literature.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, roses represent love and beauty, of course, but also sacrifice, pain, even danger when you think about the thorns.
Wow, I didn't realize. So he's taking this really loaded symbol and, like, dropping it right into this modern setting where everything's,
Doom and gloom.
Exactly.
I love that. And that actually reminds me of a poem that really captures this tension, this back and forth between, tradition and modernity, light and shadow. It's called 15.54.
Oh, yeah. The one where he's just hanging out, drinking cider, waiting for someone to show up.
That's the one.
That one really got to me. It felt so relatable somehow.
And that's what's so clever about it, right? He takes this really big, almost cosmic exploration of love and longing, and he grounds it in these very specific, very everyday details.
Totally.
The can of cider, the time on the clock, it's all incredibly vivid.
Yeah, you're right. It really makes you feel like you're right there with him, like you're feeling that anticipation too.
And by putting those everyday details side by side with these, grand themes, it's almost like he's elevating the mundane. Like he's saying, hey, look closer. Find the extraordinary within your own life.
Which, in a way, brings us back to all those unanswered questions. Because for all this talk about love and longing, we never really find out who he's talking about.
You're right. He never reveals who this mysterious you is.
Right.
And that's one of the things that makes Tainele Iubirii so fascinating to me. It's like he's inviting us into this incredibly intimate conversation, this outpouring of, raw emotion. But he's not giving us all the answers. He wants us to think, to feel, to come to our own conclusions.
It's like we're getting this glimpse into his heart, but there's still this part that's like hidden, secret. And honestly, that almost makes it more alluring. It's like, who eyes this mysterious muse? What's their story?
Right. And that brings us to what I think is the biggest mystery of all, the dedication. Because he dedicates this entire collection, all these love poems, to the one who denies you.
Oh, man. Yeah. That one hit hard. It's brutal.
It really is. And more than a little heartbreaking, too, don't you think?
Definitely. Because it implies that it's not reciprocated. That whoever he's writing about, whoever he feels all of this for, they don't feel the same way.
Right, exactly. And yet, even knowing that, he still puts it out there. He still dedicates all of these intensely personal poems to them.
It just, I don't know, it says so much about like the depth of his emotions.
Absolutely. And his willingness to be vulnerable, too. To just kind of embrace the messiness and the complexity of love, even when it hurts.
It's raw. It's honest.
It's powerful.
It really is. But it also makes you wonder if this whole denial thing is meant to be taken literally, or if it's more metaphorical. Like, is he talking about an actual person? Or is it more about an ideal or maybe even a part of himself?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it takes guts to do that, to just put your heart out there like that, even with the possibility of it getting, well, denied.
It really does. And I think that's part of what makes this collection so powerful, honestly. That vulnerability, that defiance. He's not shying away from the more, complicated aspects of love. The darkness, the doom, if you will, right alongside the beauty of it.
And isn't that something we can all relate to? In a way, I mean, love's not always like sunshine and roses, right?
Definitely not. Sometimes it's messy, unpredictable, even painful. And I think Alexandru really captures that full spectrum of experience in his work.
Yeah. And it's amazing how he does it while still weaving in all these elements of Romanian culture and tradition, too.
He's bridging worlds, isn't he?
Yeah.
Ancient and modern, personal and universal. It's quite remarkable.
He's given us a lot to think about, that's for sure. So as we kind of resurface from this deep dive into the secrets of love, what would you say is like the main takeaway?
That's a good question. I think for me, Alexandru's work reminds us just how powerful love really is in all its forms and all its messiness, and how it has this incredible ability to shape us, to challenge us, to inspire us.
I like that.
He's asking us to, look beyond the surface, to find the extraordinary in the everyday, and to embrace the full spectrum of human emotion, even the parts that are, maybe a little harder to deal with.
Beautifully said. And on that note, to our listener who brought us this incredible collection, we'll leave you with this thought. There's a certain timeless quality to Alexandru Bejer's poems, right? The way he blends modern language with these age-old themes. It's almost as if they could have been written yesterday or centuries ago. What do you think? Does Tainele Iubirii transcend time?